5-year-old girl woke up at 4 in the morning every single day, not to go to school, not because of a nightmare, but because her stepfather ordered it. She had to exercise, then she had to practice writing, and if she made a mistake, even a tiny one, a single crooked character in her notebook, there were consequences. She was too small and too exhausted to survive. The message she left in that notebook is one of the most heartbreaking things I have ever read. And the worst part, the part that haunts everyone who looks at this case, is that the people whose job it was to protect her were right there, twice, and sent her back anyway. This is the story of Yua Funato and the systems that failed her. On the morning of March 2nd, 2018, emergency services were called to an apartment in Meguro, a quiet residential ward in central Tokyo. Inside they found a small girl, 5 years old, unconscious. Her feet were severely frostbitten. Her face and body were covered with bruises. When paramedics lifted her, she weighed 12 kilograms. That is the average weight of a healthy 2-year-old. Yua Funato was 5. She was rushed to hospital, but it was already too late. She died of sepsis, a full-body infection, triggered by pneumonia that had set in because her immune system had essentially given out. An autopsy revealed approximately 170 separate injuries on her body. Her thymus, the organ central to the immune system, had shrunk to roughly 1/5 of its normal size. That specific kind of shrinkage, doctors noted, is a marker almost exclusively seen in children who have suffered sustained, repeated abuse. She had lost 4 kilograms in her final 2 months of life. She had been losing weight steadily since the family arrived in Meguro in late January, 6 weeks before she died. Yua's mother was Yuri Funato, then 25 years old. Yua was her daughter from a previous relationship. Her stepfather, the man who would be her killer, was Yua Funato, 33. The three of them had moved from Kagawa Prefecture on the island of Shikoku to Meguro on or around January 23, 2018. By every account, the 6 weeks that followed were systematic and relentless. From the day the family arrived in Meguro, Yudai imposed a regime on Yua that would be hard to describe as anything other than calculated cruelty. He restricted her food to the point of starvation. In court, he admitted that he banned her from eating carbohydrates, meat and fish. On the worst days, she was allowed a single small meal, a cup of broth and a few mouthfuls of rice. Nothing else. He told investigators he believed she was overweight. She was 5 years old and weighed 12 kilograms when she died. Every morning, no matter the weather, he woke her at 4 in the morning to exercise. Then she had to sit and practice her hiragana, the Japanese writing script, in her drill notebook. When he decided she hadn't done well enough, he would soak her in cold water and force her to stand on the apartment balcony in winter temperatures. February in Tokyo can be bitterly cold. She stood there soaking wet. Then the beatings escalated. Between February 24th and 26th, Yudai beat her repeatedly, multiple times in the bathroom. By February 27th, she was vomiting. The family was aware she was in danger. They did not call a doctor. They did not call an ambulance. They waited. She lost consciousness on March 2nd. The call came too late. But here is what makes this more than a horrific case of family violence. Here is what made Japan stop and stare. Yua had been on the radar of child welfare authorities for more than a year before she died. In December 2016, 15 months before her death, the Child Guidance Center of Kagawa Prefecture had received reports of abuse. Yua was placed in temporary protective custody for about a month. She was released. In March 2017, she was taken into protective care again, this time for about 3 months. She was released again. The family then moved to Tokyo. When they moved, the Kagawa Center forwarded Yua's case to the Shinagawa Child Guidance Center in Tokyo. But the transfer was incomplete. Key details and the full weight of the existing case history apparently did not make it through. 3 weeks before Yua died, welfare workers tried to visit the apartment. The parents refused to let them in. The workers left. They did not force entry. They did not escalate. They did not return. Yua was still alive when they knocked on that door. In court, Yua Funato claimed that what he was doing was discipline. The court rejected that argument in plain terms. The judge's finding was that what he did constituted unreasonable food restriction and violence far removed from disciplinary action. That is legal language for, this was not parenting. This was something else. As for Yuri, her defense attorneys argued that she was herself a victim of Yudai's psychological control. According to her legal team, Yudai dominated her through daily emotional abuse, haranguing her for hours, isolating her from her own judgment. They argued she had been so thoroughly subjugated that she came to believe he was right about everything, including, eventually, about how to treat her own daughter. She wrote a book from prison, To Yua, a memoir addressed to the daughter she did not save. In it, she writes reportedly that she will never forgive herself, or him. What drove Yudai remains harder to explain from the outside. He was not Yua's biological father. He had entered her life as a step-parent, and within weeks of arriving in a new city, where no one knew them, where the paper trail hadn't caught up yet. The abuse became extreme and unrelenting. The timing is not a coincidence. Kagawa knew, Tokyo didn't know yet, and in that gap, he moved. There is also the simple, terrible fact that there was no one around to see. Neighbors in Kagawa had noticed and reported. In Meguro, they were strangers in a new place. Yua went to no school. She had no contact with other adults. She was 5 years old and entirely dependent on the two people who were hurting her. This is interpretive, not a clinical diagnosis, but the pattern is worth naming. What Yudai imposed on Yua fits something that psychologists and family violence researchers call coercive control. Not just violence, but a system of domination. The early morning wake-ups, the impossible writing drills, the food restrictions, the punishment for failure, these are not the behaviors of someone losing their temper. They are the behaviors of someone who has decided that another person's existence is something to be managed and punished. Control exercised this completely and this coldly typically requires that the controller has already stopped thinking of the other person as fully human. Yua was 5. She had no voice, no recourse, and no exit. She was not a child to him in any meaningful sense. She was an object of authority. The dynamic with Yuri is equally worth examining. Research on domestic violence consistently shows that psychological coercion can degrade a victim's ability to act, even against clear harm to themselves or their children. The defense team's argument that Yuri was so thoroughly controlled by Yudai that she lost her own moral agency may feel impossible to believe from the outside. How do you watch your child starve and not call for help? But coercive control works precisely by making that question unanswerable for the person inside it. The belief that he was right, that she couldn't act, that she was powerless. That belief isn't stupidity or indifference. It's the result of sustained psychological injury. She lost herself before she lost Yua. And then there is the welfare system's failure, which has its own psychological dimension. Child protection workers in Japan at the time were, and in many places still are, severely overstretched. It's said that caseloads in some guidance centers were staggering. One worker, dozens or even hundreds of active cases. The workers who knocked on that Meguro door 3 weeks before Yua died were not monsters. They were probably tired, probably overwhelmed, and faced with a legal system that gave them limited power to force entry without evidence of imminent danger. They chose the path that felt least disruptive. That choice cost a child her life. Yua herself left the clearest record of what she experienced. In her drill notebook, a child's exercise book for practicing writing, she had written out her thoughts in careful hiragana. The passage became famous across Japan after the case broke. "Mama, I will try to make myself do better tomorrow than I did today, without being told by Papa and Mama, so please forgive me. Forgive me, I beg you." She was 5 years old. She was apologizing for not being good enough. Yua Funato received a sentence of 8 years, handed down on September 17, 2019, for failure to protect her daughter. Yua Funato received 13 years, sentenced on October 15, 2019. Prosecutors had asked for 18. The court called his actions unreasonable, unjustifiable, and far removed from any legitimate concept of discipline. The case changed Japan. Prime Minister Shinzo Abe stood in front of the cameras and called Yua's death soul-crushing, Suru Karasushingu, and pledged that things would change. In June 2019, Japan amended both the Child Welfare Act and the Child Abuse Prevention Law. Corporal punishment of children by parents was explicitly banned for the first time. Japan became only the third country in Asia to take that step. And child guidance centers were given stronger legal authority to remove children from abusive homes without waiting for parents to agree. That is not nothing. That is real change. But Yua Funato did not live to see it. And it happened because people noticed only after she was gone. The two failures that haunt this case are simple. The first, when a family under active abuse investigation moves across the country, the full weight of that history has to follow them. Every detail, not a summary, not a forwarded file that gets deprioritized. Everything. The second, when welfare workers knock on a door and an abuser turns them away, that should not be the end of the visit. It should be the beginning of an escalation. Those are institutional failures. They are fixable. And the price of not fixing them was a 5-year-old girl who woke up at 4 in the morning, practiced her hiragana in the cold, apologized in her notebook for things that were not her fault, and never got to go to school. In Japan, the public response was enormous. Thousands of people left flowers at makeshift memorials. The notebook passage was read aloud in Parliament. People who had never met Yua Funato wept for her, because something about those words, written in a child's hand, broke through every layer of numbing that public tragedy usually brings. She was trying so hard. She was apologizing for existing in conditions that no child should ever have to survive. If this case stays with you, and I think it should, the most useful thing to do with that feeling is to know the warning signs. Children under 5 who seem malnourished, who flinch at sudden movements, who are never seen in the neighborhood, who seem terrified of a parent or guardian. Those signs matter. They are worth a phone call. They were worth a phone call before Yua died. Thanks for watching. If this episode mattered to you, please subscribe and share it. Because stories like Yua's deserve to be remembered. Understanding how these things happen is how we stop them from happening again.